I'm gonna be attempting to animate Nagi's goal from Bluelock Season 2 in Blender using Lego. I'll be walking through the step-by-step process of how exactly I created this animation as a beginner animator and without spending a single penny. From building, animating, to editing, this was the most difficult project I've ever done, and you're definitely gonna want to stick around till the end to see how it turned out. Before I could get my hands dirty and actually start animating, I had to get an idea of what exactly I was working with. So I gathered multiple reference photos of the 4 characters I'd be including in the animation: Nagi, Hayate, Fukaku, and Wakasuki, and scoured every corner of the internet to find as many photos as I could of the stadium itself. On top of that, I spent an unhealthy amount of time rewatching the clip I'd be animating. Anyways, in order to keep track of everything I was animating, I split the scene into 11 different smaller chunks or cuts just so I wouldn't be overwhelmed with trying to animate everything in one go with no plan. Now that we've gotten the planning out of the way, it was time to build the stadium. For this, I used mecha bricks to build the stadium over the course of the next 3 most exhausting days while working on this project. And I didn't record myself building this because, to put it simply, watching me build this thing would have been like watching paint dry. Actually, watching paint dry would have probably been more entertaining than watching mecha bricks having a literal seizure every time I tried to duplicate an object. But who can really blame mecha bricks when the stadium itself is so massive? Genuinely, I did not realize how massive this stadium was in the anime until I started to build it and ended up with this thing, even though I downscaled everything. And in case you're wondering, the main reason I tried to downscale everything was that I wanted to reduce the lag as much as possible when it came time for me to import the model into Blender. I also couldn't force myself to build rows upon rows of seats and copy and paste them and repeat the process because it was way too tedious and, in my opinion, not really worth the hassle. Now, if there's one thing every sports stadium and arena has in common, it's advertisements plastered around everywhere. Originally, I applied the decals of the advertisements I wanted directly onto the parts, but then I got this brilliant idea to create these super cool LED advertisement signs using this tutorial I found on YouTube. To make the LED advertisement signs, first I had to design the different decals for each of the advertisements using Photopea. Then I imported these decals into Blender as an image plane, played around with a couple of nodes, and I was basically done. And it was all thanks to this guy who made such a straightforward and clear to follow tutorial. No, but seriously, I owe a lot of credit to this guy because he saved me so much time. With that finally out of the way, I started to work on the minifigures I'd be animating with. Now, I couldn't really find any official Lego prints that would be accurate enough for the 4 characters, so I created custom decals for each character on my tablet using a software called Autodesk Sketchbook. I made the decals for the head, torso, arms, and legs for each character, and I ended up with a total of 16 different decals once I was finished. Creating the face decals was probably the most difficult by far because I didn't want the faces to look like bootleg figures, but I also didn't want them to look too much like ordinary Lego minifigure faces. Thankfully though, I managed to find the right balance of what I was aiming for, and overall I'd say I'm really happy with how all the characters turned out, and I think they look accurate to the anime. And now, the part you probably clicked on this video for. Animating. My goal with making this animation was to be able to capture the scene in Lego as realistically as I could, but also add in a little bit of personal flair without straying too far away from the original animation. The first thing I had to animate was the ball coming towards Nagi as Nagi got prepared to catch the ball with his feet, and I also had to animate the 2 players defending him, running towards Nagi and the ball. Just like the original animation though, I made sure to move in the camera a little bit closer as the scene progressed. The next shot of this animation was focused on Nagi, his foot, and the ball, as I animated the ball landing onto the top of his foot with his leg turning, and I also made sure to track the movements of the ball using the camera. Then I animated Nagi's lip tap, where Nagi's foot kicks the ball to the ground and the ball bounces back up. This scene was a little bit hard to animate than I expected it to be, and I had to make several adjustments to make the scene look somewhat decent. This next scene was the build up to Nagi's jumping turn. This scene definitely wasn't my best work, but I just decided to roll with it because it was such a short part of the animation and it wasn't really that important of a scene anyways. After that, I animated the next 2 sections of the animation, which were super easy to animate. The first section was Nagi frozen midair as the camera moved from bottom to top, and the scene following that one was just of Nagi's face, and all I had to do was animate Nagi's hair moving. Then, to kick it off quite literally, I animated Nagi kicking the soccer ball. But the shot was a little bit more difficult to animate than I thought it would be, and something didn't really look quite right. But after going to the next section of the animation, I figured out that the ball was way too close to the camera and that it should have went beyond the view of the camera after it was kicked. I also noticed that the ball curved as it was kicked, and I made sure to animate that. I also animated the movements of the goalkeeper as he tried to block the ball. And after a week of hard work, it was finally time to render this thing.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
Even even though my animation is finished, I still need to edit this whole thing. First, I used CapCut to put my animation and the actual animation side by side so I could line up the audio and the footage and trim down the unnecessary portions of clips. It turned out that my animation had a lot of sections that were too short, so I had to extend those clips out, and because of that, the animation does look a little bit choppy in some parts, but thankfully it's not too noticeable. Then I also did some simple color grading, if you can even call adjusting the brightness and contrast color grading. If you can't tell, I have zero experience with color grading, so I just did whatever I could to make the animation look a little bit nicer and pop out a bit more. For the final touch, I imported this edited clip from CapCut into DaVinci Resolve, and just like the anime, I added the gold text overlay at the end of the clip. I couldn't really figure out how to make the text overlay from scratch, so I used this text preset and added this blue base plate overlay at the end because I thought it looked nice. And now, after a full week, here is the final result.
シュートモーション瞬間吸収からのジャンピンターンはじめまして日本俺が凪誠士郎だ
By no means is my animation studio grade level or really anything near it, but for where I am personally as a beginner with only 2 other animations I've made, I'm pretty proud of everything that went into this project. And if you're still here watching this video, I want to say thank you for sticking around with me throughout the whole process, and if you'd like to see any videos in specific or have any requests for similar videos like this, I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.